This is very, very, very sad because just off to my right, I have a big old picture of the Rolling Stones here. And today I woke up to the news that Charlie Watt, the longtime drummer, passed away at 80 years old. Fresh off of surgery, and just looks like, by all accounts, he just passed away peacefully in the night. And that is incredibly sad because of all the pictures that are around here. I've got the Stones, then just off to that, I've got Muhammad Ali knocking out Sonny Liston. You guys know I've got my Arnold Schwarzenegger picture back there, this still from Pumping Iron. And then I've got, great pictures behind me as well. And I'm surrounded by the inspirations of absolute greatness, hopefully to be able to achieve such a level of greatness in whatever field I find myself in that can be around such important people, okay? That, of course, is the aspiration. Will I get there? It's a tough road, but that's my aim. And speaking of the Stones specifically, I don't know if it's my favorite band of all time. I've got like a list of about 5 right now, and it changes depend on who I'm listening to the most. But when it comes to just classic, good old rock and roll, nobody's gonna beat the Stones, okay? They've done it the longest. They've done it the best. They've been the most consistent about it since the late 60s. Satisfaction, Sympathy for the Devil, which for my money is probably the greatest song ever written. Mostly because everybody who covers it, from Motorhead to Guns N' Roses, does a great cover of it. And there's been 3 constants within the Rolling Stones. Yeah, Bill Wyman was there as the bass player for a long old time, but he retired in the late 80s, and hey, he deserved it after all of the time that he put into that band. And then for the longest time, Ronnie Wood. They always had a revolving door at rhythm guitar, but he's been there for, as long as I've been alive, I think. But it was always Mick, Keith, and Charlie. They've been there since the beginning, and man, this sucks. Like, my heart goes out to his family, obviously, for as little as that does, but I've been a Stones fan for as long as I've been a music fan. Like, I'll show you. This is my wallet. I've had it. As you can see, I've had this for 10 years. At least, I can't even remember. So to see this, I just know that it's coming to an end, and yes, I already know that they're in their 80s. Yes, I know they've done decades worth of drugs, and yeah, the clock is ticking, and will I have the opportunity to see them before they end up calling it a day? Before they shuffle off this mortal coil? I certainly hope so, but it won't be the same because Charlie's not going to be there. Charlie Watts was a rock of the Rolling Stones. The stone skinned man who died peacefully at 80 years old in a London hospital Tuesday was the foundation of the British band and the foundation of rock and roll as we know it today. The heartbeat, both literally and figuratively, of the band came outward from Charlie Watts. Alan Light, co-host of SiriusXM's Volume Debatable show, told the Post. And I think you could see it when you would see them play live. It was when Keith Richards, obviously, would turn around, sometimes put his foot up on the drum riser, and he and Charlie would lock in. It was where the groove on the band could be found. And the groove was the very heart of the Rolling Stones from 63 until Watts' death. It's what allowed Mick to go out and do whatever he wants to do, to become the front man he became. Watts once joked that teaming with Jagger led to decades of Mick's bum running around in front of me. Yup. The steadiness of Watts keeping the Stones in the pocket came from jazz sensibilities that always made the band swing as well as rock. Yeah, they were never really complex drum fills. They were just steady and appropriate for the song. Was he talented? Yes, definitely within his own right. Could he bang away like Mickey D, like Keith Moon, Neil Peart? Perhaps, but that's not what the Rolling Stones called for. That's not what their sound was. I have a picture of Charlie with a saxophone around his neck, with his orchestra, with his jazz band. Legendary rock photographer Bob Gruen told the Post, noting that Watts even played the Blue Note. He always perceived himself as a jazz drummer. You can definitely tell that. That was always his thing. Those boys can be a rock and roll band, but what I'm doing here when it comes to listening to big band records and Duke Ellington records and learning about the power and the nuance of rhythm. He wasn't a big flashy player, said Light. He wasn't the thunder of John Bonham. He wasn't the sort of wild anarchy of Keith Moon, but he kept the swing in the band and everything that he did. Watts' unflashy, understated style extended beyond the music in the very manner. He reportedly kept more than 200 suits in his London apartment. Yeah, he played the way he was. He was just the constant, the Stones. He's a guy who, whenever the band wasn't on tour, He'd just be at home painting, hanging out with his wife. Mick would be running around doing God knows what kind of cringy shit, picking out new wigs to take on the road. And Keith nowadays would just, I don't know, be buying enough cartons of smokes to get back out on the road. So now it's funny because Charlie recently went under the knife for, I forget exactly what the procedure was, but yeah, they were supposed to be embarking on a tour that was originally postponed by the COOF, 13-stop trip, and yeah, the decision was made that yeah, they were just going to go along, and the new replacement drummer was going to be Steve Jordan. He was going to fill in. He was already a session recorder for them, and he'd been playing with the band on and off for a long period of time, so he's naturally just going to slide right in, but he's not going to be Charlie. He's not going to pretend to be Charlie either. He can play the fills, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. Following the death of drummer Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones may have found a new replacement, Steve Jordan. Jordan's 64. He's 64? God damn. You know the drill. At Watts' request, following recent surgery, the legendary drummer received that required him to take some time off to recuperate. 2 weeks ago, Mick Jagger said Jordan would sub in as Watts recovered, adding that he looked forward to Watts' return. Oh, Jordan was only supposed to fill in for the duration of the band's 13-stop no-filter tour this fall, which kicks off at September 26th in St. Louis, and would have marked the first time since '63 that Watts had not been behind the drums on tour. Yeah. There's no official word on whether Jordan will become Watts' permanent replacement or whether the tour will be postponed, but the under-the-radar artist seems to have the right credentials for the job. Let's do just a little bit of background on this guy because, yeah, he's incredibly talented in his own right, but again, this is the Stones, and they are unlinkable from rock and roll. Jordan is a singer, songwriter, and producer who has worked with Eric Clapton, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Billy Joel, B.B. King, Stevie Nicks, and John Mayer, among other notable musicians. He started working with the Stones in '86 while they were recording Dirty Work. Decent album. At the time, he hung out in the studio and even played on the album, one of the first times he had filled in for Watts. In '86, he was also on leave from the house band on The Late Night with David Letterman, but was good enough to be remembered by the Stones for his Saturday Night Live performances that the show's house band in the late 70s and early 80s. He continued to collaborate with the Stones in '87, when he again took over for Watts, who was not available to participate in a Chuck Berry concert documentary titled Hail Hail Rock and Roll. The rest was history. Keith Richards, who was so enthralled by Jordan's talent, continued to recruit him for more projects on Richards' solo records, Main Offender in '92 and Cross-Eyed Heart in 2015. He brought on Jordan to collaborate in multiple interviews prior. Richards gushed about the relationship with Jordan and spoke highly of his musical skill. Yeah, he really does seem like just the natural progression if they are in fact going to continue the band. Nothing really leads me to believe that they wouldn't, at least maybe for the remainder of this tour. Something tells me that might be one more tour left. But just to wrap this up, got a funny story here from the Post. Why Charlie Watts once punched Mick Jagger in his rude rock star face. There's a ton of stories, okay? Like, it was always known, yeah, Charlie, when it was not on tour, he would stay out of the public life. He would pretty much just retire back to his home, and he'd just do his paintings. He'd just live his life as a proper English gentleman for all parties concerned. And Ronnie and Keith would hang out, and they were apparently just a pisser out on the town. And whenever they'd meet up with people, they were normally very approachable. Didn't let the fame go to their head, and they were, well, this is of course after they all cleaned up and all that kind of fun stuff as well, but they were very humble about the success that they have achieved. Mick, on the other hand, if you didn't have a pair of tits, he really didn't have much time for you. I do appreciate him for that, but I got him to run afoul of Charlie Watts at the time. The late Rolling Stones drummer once got so perturbed with frontman Mick Jagger in the '80s that he punched him square in the face. Following the news of his passing, bereaved music figures and fans swarmed to social media to reminisce about the late, great rock icon's life and legacy. But beyond his many accomplishments in rock and roll, the infamously shy Watts slugging the singer and the Kisser is a wild story that Stones fans can never forget. A forgotten slice of rock history occurred in 1984 in Amsterdam when the legendary UK group's tensions were at an all-time high, the Grunge reported, many years after Watts had joined the band in '63. Yeah, we know. In his book, Under Their Thumb, Rolling Stones faneyes editor Bill German describes how Watts was irked at remarks Jagger had made during a meeting in which the Stones were discussing whether they should break up. Jagger said something like, "None of this should matter to you because you're only my drummer." What a cunt. German wrote of the Start Me Up singer's remark in his autobiography, Life. I have that. Where is that? Oh, it's over there in the closet. Need to get around to reading that. Who's displayed increasing megalomania at the time, had riled up Watts the night before by calling his hotel room and repeatedly shouting, "Where's my drama?" It was the 80s, and that was the style at the time. Okay, in that picture right there, I can definitely say Ronnie's definitely got the best head of hair on him. Keith, I don't know what's quite going on there, but Ronnie and Mick, those are wigs. Okay, you cannot convince me otherwise. Those are fucking sponsored by Hair Club for Men. Suffice to say, it was condescending, slight, didn't sit well with Watts. Watts kept it bottled up until he got back to his hotel room, German described in his book. He then clicked off his TV, put on his shoes, walked down the hall, and knocked on Mick's door. When the lead singer of the Rolling Stones opened it, the drummer clocked him in the jaw. Delightful. Charlie then turned around and calmly walked away. Per Richard's book, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame drummer had slugged Jagger so hard that he fell back onto the silver platter and smoked salmon on the table. Delicious. According to Under My Thumb, the Stones guitarist then encountered Watts in the hallway after the fact and asked where he'd come from. German wrote, the legendary percussionist matter-of-factly replied, "I just punched Mick Jagger in the face," and kept walking. Oh man, this really does suck. One of those passages of time, I suppose, but they don't make them like they used to. Like I said at the beginning, condolences to the Watts family and to all other Stones fans around the world. There are many, and they are devout, and he will be missed. Thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.